and welcome to a quick demonstration around Deltek Vision expense reporting process. When you enter the expense reporting process inside of Vision, you're prompted with a couple options. Start a new one, modify an existing one, or copy from something you've done previously. I'm going to go ahead and start with a fresh one. When you first enter the expense report, one of the first ideas that Vision is going to prompt you to is really the report name. So based upon how you set up expense reports, whether it be in a time-phased increment, or maybe you do an expense report on a trip-by-trip basis or project-by-project basis, you essentially would then name this appropriately. I'm going to go ahead and say this is for one trip to Atlanta, and I want to go ahead and start recording the expenses I incurred during that trip to Atlanta. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and record the airfare. Now I'm going to go ahead and be very delinquent in my expense reporting process and go back to a June time frame because I know I have some good data in there. The first thing that you're going to be prompted with after the date is really the idea of a category. Category is one of the key tenets of the entire expense reporting process because based upon the category and the project that you choose, this is then going to drive where the charge will ultimately reside in the general ledger. These categories are all defined by you, and this is one of the things that we do in a number of our implementations of the expense module. We help you define what these are so we can ensure the appropriate usage against your different expense groups and categories, and then how that information ultimately resides and drives back into the ledger. So let's first record the idea that I had to take an airfare or a flight to Atlanta. I'm going to go ahead and say that I went from Boston to Atlanta. And then I can go ahead and even further substantiate this expense with some additional information. This is information that will show in a detail report. This is also information that we can go ahead and push out onto the surface of an invoice. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep it very simple. Coach class, round trip. I'm going to go ahead and say this ticket cost me $465 flat, and I'm going to go ahead and drive this out to a certain project. Now watch what happens to the account over here. I'm actually going to choose a billable project. I'm working on the Benson Research Lab. And when I choose the Benson Research Lab, the system knows that it's a billable revenue-producing project. So it knows to automatically push this charge into a reimbursable expense account. If I say that, sure, this project is billable and revenue-producing, but not billable onto the client, if I uncheck this bill box, the system then knows to prompt or push it into the direct expense account associated to, down here, travel, meals, and lodging. The other thing that you're going to be aware of and be pushed into if your system has elements of work breakdown structure set up underneath your jobs is to drive that expense to the lowest level of the project's work breakdown structure. Okay. The next thing that I want to show you as it relates to the expense report is really this far column here. It's really the idea that the system is now looking for a document, a physical receipt to be associated to this line item. And it's illustrating the idea that nothing exists by that arrow being pointed up. So as I click on this particular icon, it then brings me into a supporting document dialog box where I can then go ahead and upload a physical attachment to this line item. Now, the system knows that I'm on a PC, so it's going to browse out to my desktop. It's going to browse out to one of my network drives to look for that receipt I want to attach to this line item. There it is. My ticket ATL. I'm going to go ahead and open that, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So what happens is as soon as a document upload occurs against that line item, the icon changes a little bit, and it's actually going to give you that visual as to what document exists against that particular line item. The beauty about this is this function here utilizes a utility called SQL File Stream. SQL File Stream allows and enables that physical document to then be attached to that transaction all the way through into invoicing. So the big value add here is we're now going ahead and providing electronic documentation to anyone that's going to look at that invoice, whether it be the principal, the project manager, the managing director, the client. We're cutting on a lot of paper by allowing ourselves to go ahead and attach physical electronic documents to the transactions we're incurring, not only here in expense reports, but also inside of AP. And that's a relatively new function. We call that transactional document management. And again, it's exposed here in the expense reporting process and also inside of AP. The other thing that's unique about this is if I'm doing my expense report on a mobile device and I go ahead and click on that document upload process, it's going to first prompt me out to either take a picture with my iOS device or Android device, or it's going to ask me to take an image out of my existing camera roll. So it's very user-friendly as to where you ultimately record the expense and doing the physical upload. Also, you'll see here, it automatically created as a PDF. So no matter what you upload, whether it be a TIFF file, a Word document, an image file of some form, the system automatically renders it down into a PDF format. And that's how FileStream as a utility works. So let's go ahead and just take a quick view of this. Here it is. It's a physical receipt, now forever attached to that expense line item. This entire expense receipt and line item will flow over to billing and then prompt itself to be available for electronic backup in the draft invoicing process and also the final invoicing process. One more thing I want to share with you. If I'm here, and again, maybe I went through, I had a layover, say, in Toronto, and I picked up a meal in Toronto while I was waiting for my next connecting flight, I can come in here, record the idea that it was a meal, give it a little more description, say that it was a lunch, and I can go ahead and further justify what it was. So, man's got to eat, and I'm just going to say it was just for myself. So one of the things that I know is if I'm taking that meal in Toronto, I incurred it probably in Canadian dollars. So I'm going to come down here. And again, if you're a multi-currency client, this is functionality that would be exposed to you. If you're not, this is functionality you wouldn't have to worry about. But really the concept is if I came over and I said I incurred $50 in Canadian for that meal, the system knows as of that given day, this is what the exchange rate was in our back-end tables. So it prompts you with what the exchange rate was, so you can then get to the appropriate reimbursement payment amount coming back to you. Now, that is always subject to interpretation. I, as an end user, maybe I paid that on my company credit card, or maybe I paid for it on my own personal credit card. I know that whether it be Visa, Amex, MasterCard, they all will have an uplift for international transactions. So maybe really the amount that's being recorded on my statement isn't $47.50 at all. It's actually $51.12. What the system then does is it backs into the appropriate exchange rate you need to use to make sure that you're recording something at $50 Canadian, but reimbursing the person for $51.21 as a US dollar employee. Also another common use case that occurs is people buy currency at the airport. And oftentimes when we buy currency at the airport, we get ripped off. So let's record that exchange rate that we bought the currency at. Maybe it was 1.1. So now the system knows that even though you spent 50 Canadian dollars, we're really looking to reimburse you for 55 because that's the exchange rate you bared when you bought that currency at the airport. The next process is really, again, recording this back into a project. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep it on an overhead project. And the system then knows to record that to the lowest level of work breakdown structure. And again, it's going to keep that expense inside the indirect expense column. Okay. The other thing that I really like is, let's say that this item, while was incurred by me and recorded by me, is not actually paid. Maybe it was something that was paid through a company credit card. If I actually come over here and check the company paid box, the system then knows to exclude that from any kind of reimbursement that I'd be getting. Okay. So now I want to go ahead and share with you another function that came out in our recent 7.3 release. I'm going to go ahead and log in as James Bartlett. And what we know about James Bartlett is he actually has a company credit card that he's not responsible for paying. It's actually the responsibility of the business to pay all the things that he incurs on his company credit card. So I'm going to go ahead and open this existing one. And one of the things that I think you'll find is when we get brought into the expense reporting process, it now gives you this new split screen. That split screen understands that there's a credit card that has been imported into the Vision system that has charges associated to James Bartlett. Here they are on the right-hand side. We're basically now saying we uploaded his credit card statement, and in that credit card statement, he had 3 transactions that needs to make a expense report in some form. So here's what we can do. we can go ahead and record whatever we need to record on the left-hand side and submit our expense report as is. Or we could come over here and say, all right, I know what these expenses are for. I check off the individual amounts or the individual line items. I add it to the expense report, and it automatically brings that information out of that James Bartlett credit card file right into here into my expense report itself. The beauty of this is if I, as a person from the accounting department, then manage that massive credit card process and that massive reconciliation process, I then have a new tool within the Vision application that gives me insight into what is going on with my credit cards. We have a credit card reconciliation tool. And one of the things that we can go ahead and do is we can come in here real quick, fast, and easy and get some understanding of what is outstanding. So as I come over here to the summary, I can see what kind of charges I've ultimately imported and who are those account holders to that particular card. I can see all the charges that are there, and it's actually going to show me, because I didn't save that expense report that I just created, it's going to show me that you've uploaded all these transactions into the system, but they haven't made someone's expense report yet. You can see the one here is actually in progress. That was actually from the expense report we just saw. It was the existing line item that was there when we first opened the expense report. It's at least identifying the idea that it made an expense report, although it hasn't been approved, it hasn't been submitted. So with transactional document management and the credit card reconciliation process embedded inside of the Vision expense report, we've really been able to go ahead and streamline a lot of administrative functions from the accounting perspective. Now we can go ahead and fully enable ourselves to go ahead and do electronic invoicing. All the backup that you incur from an AP or an expense reporting process can then be electronically substantiated off the back of your invoices. All the credit card information that you constantly have to go ahead and reconcile and get updated into people's expense reports, we have then eased that process as well. So those are a couple of things that I wanted to share with you in the overall expense reporting process. Obviously, if there are any more questions, reach out to your account manager, and we'll be more than happy to go ahead and assist. Again, appreciate your time. Thank you.